Rio Hondo Prep Football is one of the best kept secrets in all of Southern California. As one of the smallest enrollments year in and year out, the Cares have won 14 CIF championships and have been one of the most successful programs throughout their history. Welcome to A Charge to Keep, the official podcast of Rio Hondo Prep Football. And now, bringing you the latest news and content from his alma mater, a CIF champion in 2001. From the class of 2003, here's your host, Matt Ursima.
What's up, Rio Hondo Prep football fans? The summer is in full swing and the long wait is almost over. It is almost time to kick off another season of Rio Hondo Prep football here in 2023. August 19th cannot come soon enough. Recording this much earlier in the summer, but by the time this is out, the boys should be pretty close to putting on the pads, at least starting up double sessions and getting those fall practices in as we prepare for another great season of Rio Hondo Prep football. This is a special edition of the podcast today, guys. Something that I've wanted to do all spring, really. I put it together in the summer at some point, and it's just sometimes you get ideas and they don't always come out as you like. But this one here, I thought was very fitting for the start of a new season. 1973 was 50 years ago, and that is a special year because that was the first CIF championship in Rio Hondo Prep history. Back then, it was six-man football, and six-man's a lot different than eight-man. Eight-man's a lot different than 11-man. But back at the early days of Rio football, some humble beginnings, I'm sure, but playing six-man football with a very small enrollment like Rio is always used to. Some of the old film is funny to look at and be like, wow, this is old Rio football. But yeah, there it is. So a lot has changed since then. 1972, the guys went to the championship game, lost that game, and then came back the next year in 1973 and won the school's first championship. So today, in honor of the 50th anniversary of Rio's first CIF football championship, we are going to be joined by three members from that team. Joining us today will be John Martin, Jim Parker, and Charlie Parsons. I'm sure most of you out there recognize these names. And it's a long time ago, 50 years ago. These guys were 17 years old, we'll say. I don't know how old that makes them, but happy to have them aboard. And I appreciate them coming on here to talk about that special year. And, every year at Rio, there seems to be an anniversary of something. Last year was the 20-year anniversary of our first 11-man season. Me and my senior class. So I thought as we start 2023, it was fitting. It would be special to kind of go back 50 years to celebrate and honor the 1973 championship team. They got it all started for us. There would be no 2023 without 1973 and all the years in between, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 20 teens, and now into the 2020s. Has been great success for Rio football, and there's been 14 CIF championship banners, as well as a couple of runner-ups, but 1973 specifically, that was the school's first championship. So I thought, what better way to kick off the new season than to go back in time, specifically 50 years to 1973, coming off of a tough loss in 1972 in the championship game. This group of guys here who are representing that entire team. I couldn't get everyone on here, but I thought I'd have a few of them on. These guys will represent a group of guys that bounced back, came back in 1973 to get Rio Hondo's first blue trophy. So let's bring them on right now, representing the class of 1973. Well, the championship team, I should say. 1973 CIF champions, Jim Parker, John Martin, and Charlie Parsons. All right. It is now my privilege to be joined by members of Rio Hondo's first CIF championship team back in 1973, 50 years ago. I am joined now by John Martin, Charlie Parsons, and Jim Parker. I want to say welcome, guys, and say hello to each of you individually. How are you, Mr. John Martin?
Doing fantastic. Thank you.
And Charlie Parsons coming to us from Wrightwood, I got to imagine.
No, El Monte, but doing well and glad to be here.
Okay.
Retired off the mountain now.
Retired off the mountain. Okay. Good to know. You were a fixture up there, and for so many of us up there. And Jim Parker, a pleasure, sir, to meet you. How are you?
I'm doing great, Live up here in Reno, Nevada, and we've lived here for 30 years. So my wife and I and our kids and grandkids. So
well, that is great to hear, and it's great to meet you. I've never met you individually. I appreciate you guys doing this. Some recent news for you, Mr. John Martin. You have a new grandson, just a week or so old, right? Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And with a really, really cool name, Kenny Drain.
Really?
That's fantastic. Named after his
but goes by Kenny. So yeah, we're pretty excited.
That's great.
That is wonderful news.
Is that your first, John?
That's my second.
Second. Great.
He's got an older sister.
Okay. Great. That's
18 months going on 16. Yeah.
Well, guys, back around when you were around 16, you guys played in Rio Hondo's first championship game in 1972. Unfortunately, you guys fell short that night. I'll ask you, John Martin, if you could take me through kind of just your thoughts of that 72 game and coming up short, and then I'll ask each of you guys also as well after. But John Martin.
Wow. Well, I'll try to keep it short. I have two thoughts. Towards the end of the first half, I remember catching a pass and diving for the end zone and throwing the ball over the goal, what I thought was the goal line. And I got hit by two guys, and I remember him spotting the ball like 3 inches short. And I think the half ended. And we ended up scoring as many touchdowns as our opponent in that game, but we lost because they made every extra point and we didn't. And this was 6-man, so extra points were worth 2.
Wow.
So those were kind of my two starkest recollections, but that also then led to a little bit of the next year, some of the things I think you'll get into, but I'll let the others answer about their thoughts on that.
Sure. Charlie, what was it like 72? I mean, playing in the school's first championship game, and you guys fell a little short. I know it was 51 years ago, or 51 years ago, but what could you tell me about that night?
Well, I played in the band. I was a junior at the time and was playing JV ball, and I think our JV team was very successful in being prepared for the next year. But I can remember the game. I remember the name of their kicker, Dan Beaver, went on to play pro ball, as I recall, or at least college. He played college ball as a kicker. He was good.
Yeah,
tight game, really tight game. That's about all I can remember about that.
Tight game, and that kicker was a nail in the coffin for you guys, being perfect. Jim, what can you tell me about that night in 1972?
Well, like Charlie, I was in the band. We were JVs, and so, but I remember that game actually probably more so than I remember our championship game, quite frankly, just because again I was a spectator and a rooter, and so you're watching every play, and I remember the emotion of the game. And especially after the game, how devastated we were. And I think clearly it led the seniors or the juniors at the time to kind of take a whole different approach, I think, to the next year. And I think that's kind of the start of why 73 ended up the way it did, probably.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So many times I've talked to people who've said that, you lost the championship game and they come back the next year, a couple of years later even, and just added motivation for sure. We'll go into 73 now. And before we
I'll give you one other just quick flashbacks to the year before.
Mm-hmm.
First was Steve Martin was our tailback that, there was no one person in the league that could get Steve once he had the ball. which is, we basically had 2 plays. That's all we had the whole season, 2 plays. You either went left, cross or straight. And then it was basically everybody scatter and get to a different part of the field, and they have to put a second guy on Steve or he'd run for a touchdown. And as soon as they put a second guy on Steve, whoever he came off of, Steve would throw on the ball and they try to go for a touchdown. So the opponent was Brethren, and they were really pretty beastly. They were very, very large, had several really big guys that were very strong. And in addition to Les Piercy, if you remember that name, who was their quarterback. And they would play a very tight formation and basically just kind of ran it over us because we didn't have anybody. We had Jim Straw, Ken Koopman, but not too many else. But my other remembrance of that whole year was Casey Clevenger, because Casey was our middle linebacker, and Casey was maybe, if I was 130, he might have been 140, 150. And he just made stop after stop after stop. And I mean, these are bruisers coming at him. And it was kind of like everybody got taken out and it was one-on-one and Casey. And he just made stop after stop. And the grit of Casey Clevenger through that season and through that game, the fleetness of Steve Martin through that game. And Steve was, he had to pass and he had a really bad shoulder. I remember he was wearing special pads, and I don't think he could lift his arm over his head, but he was still, passing it and doing the thing. So that team had a tremendous amount of grit, and I just really feel pretty privileged to get to play with those guys.
Yeah, a special group indeed. And Mr. Clevenger is a huge Rio football fan. Mr. Martin is, just walks around as a humble guy, but I've heard from you and others that he was just one of the best athletes, out there. I mean, Jim, any
Nobody
other thoughts?
could stop Steve. No one person could stop him. No.
Yeah.
Jim,
Kind of like Jim the next year, it's
Jim
the
the
same
next year,
idea.
right?
Just Jim took over for Steve, who graduated and did the same thing. He probably won't tell you on this, but Jim pretty much did the same thing next year. It's just the whole play was everybody spread, give it to Jim. If they don't put 2 guys on him, he'll throw it to somebody. So anyway.
Yeah, Steve was an amazing athlete, no question about it. And so was Casey. So were all those guys. I mean, it was fun to watch.
Oh, definitely. Let me ask you each about the positions you guys played in 1973. Rio Hondo, you do everything, right? You play offense, you play defense, you're in the band. You do it all. So, Charlie, what positions were you playing in 1973 to kick off the season and throughout the year?
Well, I was primarily a defensive player, and we're talking 6-man football. I don't know if anybody mentioned that, but it's like that's long gone and hard to even remember, and people probably aren't familiar with that, but it was 6-man football. So I played an outside linebacker, cornerback kind of thing. And Jim, I think if I recall correctly, you were our safety.
Yeah.
And there was a guy named Steve Tuttle that played in the middle that was kind of the Dick Butkus of that era.
He was definitely Dick Butkus of that era. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a monster, man. So his defense primarily played a little bit of offense here and there, filling in.
So if they got past all you guys, Jim, you were the last resort. Telling me you didn't lead the team in tackles or anything back there, did you?
No, it's funny. A lot of times we even split the safeties depending on how it worked. And there were a couple other guys like Steve Hershey and a couple other guys who went back to, even John, I think, played safety some. Again, it was more about quickness. And that's why, when they faced Brethren and we faced Flint Ridge, and Flint Ridge, well, several of our schools that we faced in that year were big guys compared to us. I mean, if you looked at their lineups, and I don't remember, I went back and looked at a couple things from that year, but they had guys listed at 6'3", 6'4" on their, as seniors on the teams that we played. And our tallest guy, I think, was 6'1", right? Which, so we were pretty small, but we were quick. And so that's the advantage, I think, that we had from that standpoint. And just, I think our coaching was just that much better than everyone else's coaching, if you really come down to it. I don't know that our talent pool was any better than anyone else's by any means, but I think, the coaching and so forth that went through. But yeah, I played a little
Jim,
safety.
You ironically just summed up the last 50 years of Rio Hondo football. Honestly, undersized guys, really well coached, quickness to your advantage. Be quicker, and so that's pretty much, not much has changed in 50 years. Rio Hondo usually undersized and out coaching people, right, John?
I would totally agree.
And what position did you play? You said wide receiver and a little bit of defense also?
Yeah, I remember I played wide receiver, mostly a little halfback, but mostly wide receiver. And again, it was the same idea: get the ball to Jim. He just kind of took over for Steve. Get the ball to Jim. Everybody spread. We had Steve Hershey is, just this phenomenal halfback, and you get it to Steve Hershey, and there's nothing anybody could do.
Yeah.
He's so fast and so quick. Eric Martin was just a remarkable receiver, just could kind of drag in anything. So, and then on defense, along with Charlie, and we mentioned Steve Tuttle, he really was a Dick Buckus. He just lived his life to tackle opponents, and it was like, whatever you did, you didn't get with it close to him or you're going to get killed. And I remember Jay Lindemann, kind of a key spot on defense and doing really, really well for us on defense. Tough. And there's a very famous picture of Jay making this tackle, but right before he did, he had to push his glasses up so he could see the guy. Remember that picture? Just, it's classic picture. I think it made it in the lineup some following year, But he was another solid defensive player. Couple other guys I remember.
Yeah, Mike Rack was tough. Roger McNichols.
Roger McNichols, I remember.
Good, tough, right? They were.
Yeah. It was a solid group, pretty much all around. So yeah, those are some of my quick remembrances.
Jim, if you could paint a picture for us, because 6-man football, I mean, we all kind of know 8-man, but 6-man, I mean, it's literally half the guys that you see now in 11-man. I mean, was it like a center and then a shotgun and then maybe a back or two and then a guy split? I mean, it had to, if we looked at it now, it had to probably look pretty weird. If you could paint a picture for us.
Yeah, well, it's literally 3 men on the line. You have a center and 2 split ends usually. You could bring it in and be a tight formation, but most of the time we played spread out. We played 2 spread ends. We might off balance it, but usually it's a center and then 2 split ends, and then you had 3 people in the backfield. Generally, you called them a halfback who caught the ball from center. They pitch it back to the tailback, and then the tailback, there had to be a lateral before the tailback could run. So whether it was Steve Martin or myself or, John Martin played half, Charlie played back there. So, I mean, people traded off, but that's the beauty is whoever got the ball off the lateral, and a lot of times we just gave it to Steve Hershey just to run. I mean, because he was so fast and quick and so forth. So I was not the fastest guy. In fact, probably of the team, I was probably one of the slower guys on the team. But the advantage I had is I could throw it, and I could, at least once I had the ball, because they had to stay back because I could throw, it gave me some extra yards to run. And so I would from time to time. But I was probably the least of the runners. I was more of a thrower than I was a runner. But yeah, no, I think that's how it's set up. So you usually had 2 kind of halfbacks, and depending on, whether we were going to go in motion and in those kinds of things. But then the lateral, and sometimes we do a sweep around and in. Sometimes you'd run it up the gut and split sometimes, you'd fake it. and then throw it. So, but it was a wide open game. If you think about 6 guys on the width of a field, even though the field was a little smaller, it wasn't
Yeah, it was,
smaller, guys?
Yes.
it was 80 instead of 100.
Yeah.
40 instead of
Wide.
50 wide. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and when you're running wind sprints, you have no idea that it's smaller. But I'm telling you.
And Mr. Dowd made us do a lot of those,
was
didn't
smaller,
he?
but 6 guys to defend and to play offense. That's a lot of running that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Charlie,
we
does it sound as was it as exhausting as it sounds out there just running around chasing people? I mean, all this open space?
Wide open game. Another advantage Jim had is he had some savvy. He understood where everybody was on the field and could see those things. But yeah, definitely had to be in shape. We did do a lot of preparation in terms of sprints and conditioning, and that was a big part of even preseason, being up in the mountains running. I mean, it was pretty intense.
Remember, we had to,
horse trails.
you can't do it now, but Mr. Dowd would have us start down at the mess hall, and we had to run up to the second road, straight up the dirt. I mean, that's not environmentally friendly. You can't do that anymore. But and then those runs down, I think it was like run down to Wrightwood, and it was all great going down, and then you turned around and it was just brutal coming back. But yeah, Mr. Dowd ran us a lot.
Well
and
conditioned.
Guys, I'm gonna say, especially like Steve, Hershey, Jim here, who played both ways a lot. It's a lot of running during the game, and they just rarely came off the field, And I think Charlie and I sometimes, I got a break on defense, Charlie got a break on offense, but Jim and Steve and a couple of the other guys, they were just going at it all the time. But I think we were better conditioned than most of the other teams as well.
Again, yeah, talking about 50 years of Rio football, that was usually the case. And it's good to hear from the foundation of it all that not much has changed in that regard. You mentioned Mr. Dowd. If you could talk to me about Coach Dowd, what he was like. We'll start with Jim. I mean, we all knew Mr. Dowd. We did later in life. He was done coaching, but I've heard some good stories about him, his approach to things. You guys kind of touched on it there. Jim, what do you got on Coach Dowd back then?
Probably I look back, other than Mr. Hampton himself, probably Mr. Dowd had the most profound influence on my life, just growing up. And, he's like a second father in a lot of ways. I'm a little emotional about it. He just was just a great man to me. He had no sympathy though, for any excuse. No matter, it didn't matter. You had a broken foot, a broken hand. You were running the horse trail twice a day. You were doing this. You were doing that. And when you're dead and gone, you can then cry about your wounds and your hurting, parts of your body. But until then, there were no excuses. And I really think that's what. It was in the preseason, all in the prep, all in the running, all in the getting together as a team and committing to winning that CIF championship. I don't think there was anyone on that team that went into the senior year or into that year that didn't believe we'd go undefeated, that didn't believe we'd win. And that has to do with Mr. Dowd and the focus he put into us. Because you practiced and practiced and practiced and conditioned until it was in your genes. I mean, that's how I felt about it. So as much as, at the time as a 16-year-old or whatever it was, you didn't like it, you did it, and it ended up in the results. And I know that, whether it's Mr. Johnson, Mr. Warwick, Mr. Drain, my brother, Joe, they all took that same philosophy into their coaching, at the high school level there at Rio Hondo. And I think that makes a huge difference, right? Is that discipline.
Yeah. Yeah. John, you've been around the program a long time and seen a lot of football over the years and the coaches. I mean, do you think the coaches have done a good job really in following in the footsteps of someone like Mr. Dowd?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, the game today is way more strategic, complicated than when we played. Like I said, we had 2 plays, right? I mean, it was like P1 or P6. I mean, I think that was it. P1, P6, we didn't, you didn't even have to huddle, it didn't matter. And now it's way more, and that's obviously where, Mr. Johnson built on Mr. Dowd, and then, Ken and all the rest of them now, and now they have a coach for every position, or all these different coaches and all these really football gurus out there working as a group. It's a pretty good group they have today because it's a nice club. My other remembrance of Mr. Dowd, besides obviously the demonstration of just the most devout Christian person you could ever hope to be under, was he had a sense of humor, unfortunately, and he used it on us. And I can just remember you're dead tired. It's one of those nights and you're just about ready to flop on the field and forget about going home. And he'd come up and he'd say, okay, we're going to do these wind sprints. And then he'd say, oh, so I'm going to kick this football. And if I kick it through the goalpost, you don't have to run. Do you remember those guys?
Yeah,
I
Remember
do.
all those kicks? It was like, I'm praying as hard as I've ever prayed. Lord, help him to make it. Help him to make it. Because if he doesn't make it, I don't think I'm going to make it. Anyway, he had a sense of humor, but obviously, like Jim expressed, we were very fortunate to be under his Christian guidance and his example, and still to this day, the way he lives,
Yeah, what an example for sure. Charlie, what are your thoughts on Coach Dowd and the man Mike Dowd, just the early leader of Rio Hondo football?
We had I don't know if the other guys heard this, but I always thought of him as a big man with a big heart. He's a big guy with a big heart. I do remember the kicking through the goalpost, and I think he only made it once. He made it. Made this kick. It was amazing, and everybody just run off the field and didn't have to run that night.
Now, why did he get
that's
to
where? Say again.
Go ahead, Charlie. Sorry.
Oh, I just remember that night, and I worked under him at up in the mountains too. Big man with a big heart. Leave it at that.
Oh man, well, very well said. I hope he gets to give us a listen. And yeah, he was like our leader when we were in high school. Like he was Mr. Wingate Park for the longest time, which is where I grew up with care and everything. And there's Mr. Dowd in the office, not knowing he was this football coach and larger than life guy. But it's good to hear that not a ton of things have changed. So I've looked for like 6-man football footage for a long time. I stumbled across one. It was from 1972 though, but it's a game that was played at Care Field. I'm going to see if I can pull this up for you guys. Let me see. 1972, Ambassador Christian at Rio Hondo. I don't know why it is black and white, guys, but let me see. All right, here we go. Can you guys see this? Let's see here. Look, here's an extra point, it looks like.
Yeah.
2 linemen.
John.
Oh, roughing the kicker. Oh, man. This is a trip. What number was Clay? Hershey 32?
Yeah, that's why I remember it. Am I right?
Well, in 73, but you said this is 72?
This is
Yeah,
72
this is different.
according to the internet here. There's Casey Clevenger, number 10.
What number was Jim Struck back then?
Yeah, 32 might have been Jim that year. I think you're right, Jim.
Right.
Might have been Jim Struck. Yeah.
I mean, he was a big boy.
33.
Yeah.
10 is Chris, I bet.
Yeah, Chris Horton.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yep. 33 is Steve Martin.
Yep.
Right.
Get him. It's just, it's so interesting. It's 6-man football, and they kind of run this tight little running back play. Oh, good hit there.
Oh, they were huge. Ambassador was probably the biggest team I've ever
Yeah,
played.
they were
They
big
didn't have
boys.
anybody out. They were huge.
They were big boys in '73 too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of this open space.
Yeah,
We'll try to find some let me see some Rio Hondo offense here. But yeah, there's the old bank there at Care Field. What is this? Okay, so hike back, pitch it.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah,
is
there's
6-man
Steve.
football, huh?
Yeah.
At least we had face masks.
And even though he's 20 yards past the line of scrimmage, all he had to do was fake, and most people would go for it. It was amazing.
You said that too, John. You said he was always pump fake it. And what are these ads we got here? 2 seconds.
Yeah, that was my claim to fame.
There's
And
another
the
extra,
one pass I threw my entire life. Yeah.
like a 10-yard snap on the extra.
It's
Wow.
an extra point. Who was the kicker for us in '72?
Jim Struck.
Oh, that's right. It was Jim. Yeah, I remember that.
Anyway, if you guys ever want to watch this, it's on YouTube, just ACHS Rio Hondo game. And it's about 24 minutes. And it's I watched some footage of it. Everyone was eligible, right? All eligible receivers?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, everyone's eligible one. Yeah, it had, again, yeah. The only way you could run it, though, is if you lateral it.
Oh, okay, so you couldn't go direct snap, quarterback sneak or something. Got to have a pitch. I want to find some offensive plays on the old Rio Hondo offense here. Let's see. It's like all defense, although it might be like their highlight film or something. But I've never seen any footage of the 72 or 73 championship game. We got footage of pretty much every other championship game out there.
Well, I'm sure someone took film. I don't know whatever happened to it, whether,
There was your pump
Who
fake.
was it? Wasn't it Mr. Phillip, or who used to do some filming of our games when we were, remember someone sat there and filmed in the back a lot of times. I want to say it was Mr. Phillip, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know who it was. Or Mr. Francis. I don't know.
Saw a shot of the band there in the end zone, guys. Some of the band members just hanging out, getting ready for a halftime show, I'm guessing. Anyway, I thought I'd pull this up and give you guys some thought. You guys are talking about some of your teammates. If you would, Charlie, who are some from that was your senior year, right? Who else was in that senior class, which would have been 1974, I guess. But Charlie, who else were the seniors on that class?
Wow. John, help. No, I know I keep coming back to Steve Tuttle because he was kind of the catalyst, especially the defense. He also was our kicker that year, Tuttle was. And I remember John being the holder, and Tom Fowler, also a senior, was the center. And they'd go out and practice every lunch period and just determined to put that ball through the post for the extra points consistently. Other seniors, John, I don't know.
Well, Jay Lindemann, who we mentioned.
Lindemann was a senior, and Lindemann and Tuttle and I both all lived in Monrovia. So we were kind of the Monrovia gang up there. Who else, John?
I'm trying to think.
Oscar.
Oh yeah,
right?
Oscar Alvin.
Yeah, I couldn't remember his last name. I remember his first, but let's see.
Rick Dunia was a junior, I believe.
Yeah, Rick was in the same. Mike Barak, myself.
Was Mike Story?
Roger
He's a
McNichol.
junior, but I think was Mike on the team?
Mike Story came up for the playoffs, I think.
Yeah, Ben Simonson was a senior that year, but Ben, I'm trying to remember if he made it. He may not have made it into Rio until.
I don't think he was
football.
at Rio in his senior year. I don't know what.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
That was probably the
so
senior.
let's see.
So I think there was like six of us or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's probably.
I want to ask you guys specifically about the 73 championship game. Who who you played. I don't know if you remember the score or whatever, but Jim, did you guys say you went undefeated that year, or I can't remember?
Yeah, we were
Wow.
undefeated. Yeah.
I think we played Flint Ridge, right?
Yep.
For the senior, yeah, I think we played 3 playoff games to get there, and Flint Ridge was in. So if I remember right, it was us and Flint Ridge that got into the playoffs from our league, the prep league. But everyone in the prep league, because Pacific was in it, Poly, Flint Ridge, I don't remember all the teams. But anyway, Flint Ridge, we beat them at the end of the regular season. Then they made it into the playoffs. We made it into the playoffs. And then was it the playoff game, the championship game that was wet and muddy, or was it the? Do you remember, guys? I remember. I thought it was a championship game, but maybe it wasn't the championship game. Maybe it was a championship game. It was a Flint Ridge game. I can't remember whether it was the championship game that we won, or the game between us at the end of the season. I just remember it was the muddiest game I've ever played. It was just a mud ball.
That's fun.
I just don't remember which game it was. It was against Flint Ridge, but I don't remember which one.
John, what was it like hoisting that blue trophy that night, 1973, 50?
Well,
50
that was
years
like
ago.
one of the most special times. I will say that was probably one of the highest emotional, special times in my life through that age. There's been a couple others that have obviously surpassed that,
Of course.
getting older, but especially after the loss the year before. And as Charlie kind of pointed out, we lost the year before on kicking. And I remember Tom Fowler and Steve Tuttle and I kind of made a pact that we weren't going to lose the next year on kicking. And somehow we started on the summer trip, just going out wherever we were, and Tom would hike and I'd hold and Steve would kick, even if we didn't have anything to kick at. And I can remember we'd eat our lunch at snack, and every lunch we'd spend all of lunch. Tom would just keep snapping and I'd just keep holding, and Steve would just keep kicking, because we were determined we were not going to lose another game on kicking. So I don't know that we even needed the kicking to win those games, because of some of the things that Jim expressed, and I don't think we needed it that year, but that was just after being part of the loss the year before. We were just determined we were not going to lose this on kicking. And Steve Tuttle would I think he had his own kicking style. I think it was similar to what you do today, but I think it was his own style, but he just practiced and practiced and practiced. So again,
it's all about
back to the old deep Rio philosophies, back to, you win it on grit, you win it on practice, you win it on and obviously, we were praying a lot through all of that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to understand walking away the year before what happened, but God's got his plan in his own time, and maybe that was a lesson we needed to learn, that that's the highest level we'd ever been as a school, getting that. And so we obviously were very, very sensitive to that and trying to be very prayerful of the whole situation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that so many times in life, especially for me, like I've learned that, in prayer, you pray and you want things to work out. But if you win all the time, you won't appreciate the wins unless you have some losses in there. And I think that's the lesson, is just like, you can try your hardest and maybe it wasn't hard enough. And anyway, it's just losses aren't always awful, although in the moment they are. No one wants to hear that. Charlie, raising the trophy there in 1973. You've gone on to do great things with Mount Care and helped so many kids up there, and just had a lot of great memories. But I mean, 1973, 50 years ago, raising that trophy, what was that like for you?
It was a good thing. I don't think it was everything, but it was a good thing. And there's so much of the things that went behind it, that meant a lot. And looking back on it now, I mean, it was maybe such that you could even say that there is life after high school football.
Yeah.
So it's just not everything, but it's a big thing when you're 17 years old.
Mm.
And so I would caution players not to let it be such a big thing that you can't function in other parts of your life. So
Yeah.
just trying to tone it down a little bit, but it was a great thing, but it wasn't everything.
Yeah. No, there's so many more things out there. I think it's nice to have a goal and pursue something that you're only going to do a short time on this earth. And here we are talking about it, 50 years later. I want to ask each of you guys individually, kind of piggybacking on that, life after high school and kind of where you guys went with your careers, and if you saw like your experiences with Rio Hondo football, if that carried into, adulthood and life and family and everything, because it seems to be that way with so many people I talk to. Jim, after high school, what'd you get it? Take us through high school into kind of where you're at now.
Well, for me, raising the trophy, I guess, if you will, it was a great thing. But the best thing for me through that process, like I say, was the character building. I rely on that character building, those times of running sprints, the times of our team meetings, the time of our prayers, the time. I mean, I can see that more than I can even replay anything in a game. I really don't have a memory of any real game time footage in my brain, but I have tons of memory of running sprints and sitting as a team together in the locker room or on the field, and the times that we talk and the times that we would pray and the times we were at camps. And so the character building is what, and even when I had my own kids, I mean, when they want to quit, when they want to, hey, it's too hard, that kind of thing. I mean, all those memories come flooding back of the character building that our coaches did for us, right? That's what that was about, and the camaraderie of the team. So for me, probably I think it was 83, 84. I left Care Youth League to pursue some business goals and things that I had, and I just really felt God was calling me into to doing some business, to where ultimately, I could go out into the business world and make an impact and use the things that God had given me to my talents. And so and that's kind of, I spent 45 years in real estate development, developing and building and doing things. And I wish I could say it was all God led, but Satan has a way of attacking, and he did for me for many years. I kind of wandered in the desert, if you will, but God brought me back, thankfully, and the last 15 years have been very productive in the sense of just surrendering to what God's will is. And like I say, I have 3 beautiful children and their families, and I have 6 grandkids, and God's been just overly off the top blessing in every way in my life, and only glory to him. So God's been good to me.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Yeah, man, it's great stuff. Grandkids, I heard, is a wonderful thing. So I'm glad you guys are enjoying that. Speaking of grandkids, John just had your second, and I know a lot of people know you at Care Youth League. You went and became one of the I don't know, the higher ups up there. But take us through your journey after high school to now.
Well, went into Archulay, and I say that I started coaching junior high, and the next year in Archulay they had me coaching. Remember the old KALA league, which was a year before junior high, and the next year was like 5th grade, and the next year was 4th grade. And my claim to fame is I successfully worked my way down the coaching ranks to the kindergartners, where I coached for 20 years. So that's kind of my claim to fame. Not many people can say that. And then when, there wasn't any division lower that you could go. They put me over at, asked me to work on leading the team to start the Pearl Preparatory School, and was really fortunate, the amazing people that we had and how God worked miracles there, And it just shows, like, the organization made a commitment and said, okay, we're going to start on this, and you lead up a team and go do it. And within a few months, that Lutheran school opened up for us, and we could make a deal to start there. And finding something like that is just obviously totally miraculous, and God just did that. And then, a few years into Pearl, transitioned over to the care. They wanted an executive director, so asked me to kind of take over that. And there I get to work with all these amazing directors at Care Youth League. So that was a real blessing, and probably the only thing further down the ranks than coaching D's would probably have been executive director at Care Youth League, right? So I used to say we have a really flat administration and I'm underneath it. And that's really true, because everything at Care is upside down, or the inverse of the way it normally works. So that was really true. But it was quite a joy. I would relate our experiences. Charlie will remember our senior gift and all the many, many hours we spent on the brick walls there at the front of the school, going down into the pits out in Irwindale to get bricks and bringing them back and cleaning them. And that dad that helped us lay those brick walls, and just that experience, I would say, was God's leading, because further on in my life, the bricks became a little bigger, and we're working on Stivers Center and eventually Care Park. And you talk about experiences and defeats, the 72 year, and you look back on, you pick yourself up, you keep going. I think, it took us 14 years to open Care Park. And so, 72 was just a warm up for all the issues that we would have to face dealing with the Army Corps and City of Irwindale and Caltrans and 12 different LA County departments. And Jim can understand what I'm talking about probably better than anybody else. But, it was, again, God leading, just one little miracle after another happening right when he needed it and wanted it. And so, yeah, I've really had a very gracious ride, and just very thankful for Care, obviously, for Rio, for the tremendous people that God put to be my leaders that did that, and obviously all glory to him. So it's a pretty simple story, just working my way down.
Working your way down. Principal of Pearl Prep to executive director of Care. No, there's been great leadership through you, Mr. Martin, and Care is in a great place. Adversity, character building, to what you said, Jim. I mean, football really, paves the way for a lot of daily lives later on that we don't know about. Charlie, the mountain man, the Mr. Mount Care, the nicest human alive, as I would go up as a kid, and you singing songs by the fire. Camp was always as nice and clean as could be. I mean, lessons from Rio football kind of helped you into that career and beyond all those years?
Sure. I remember during high school and being on the varsity football team that it was very service oriented in many ways. I'm not sure it was a requirement, or a lot of us did what was called assistant coaching at the time with kids. So we get out there and work with them in sports. And then also, I don't know if you guys remember this, I'm sure you do actually. Saturday morning, we come after the football game, come early in the morning, 7, I think it was a 7:15 start time, and you better be there. But it was all about prepping the field at that time. And so there was this emphasis, or kind of a theme of serving others. So that was pretty impactful. Some of it seemed forced at times, and that may or may not have been true for some, but it was really a matter of the heart whether that took root and grew. And so it did for many. And that was a big part of the outlook that I had anyway. And then I was at Cal Poly Pomona in some of my early college years, sat under a man named John Scolinos, who was a baseball coach. Some people may be familiar with him. If you're not, he was a great man. And he kind of shaped how I thought about athletics and how it is impactful and influential in people's lives rather than just playing a game or whatever. He had so many things that he would say that stuck. So that was an influence. I ended up moving up to Wrightwood in 1980, I believe. Yeah. And was there till just a few years ago. That's a whole big story with development, as John had talked about, the multitudes of paperwork and red tape that you have to jump through, right, Jim? In order to develop, especially on federal land. So both Mount Care is on federal land, and so is Care Park. It's on Army Corps versus United States Forest Service. So involved with a lot of the development and the hoops that you have to jump through. Anyway, as we all have expressed, God as creator brought those things about. And you feel really privileged to be a part of it. So
I'd like to tell the Charlie story that Charlie didn't, if it's okay, Matt.
Yes, yes.
So, my fond remembrances of Mount Care as a high school guy was the outhouse down at the bottom of the upper camp. And, and I tell this story, I tell it over and over. It's just you say Mount Care, what do you remember? Well, I remember my salvation at Mount Care. But next to that, I remember that outhouse. And I remember that the spring on that door going whack, 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 whack. Every time somebody used it, especially in the middle of the night when you're right up the hill. And, when we took over the lower camp from the Bluebirds, we thought we were living at the Hilton because they had A-frames, open A-frames. It still had outhouses that went whack, 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 but open A-frames. And you fast forward to the Charlie Parsons era, obviously a little bit of pre-work done with the Dowds and Jim Davis, but mostly on Charlie's watch, and God using Charlie miraculously how he did. He got his contractor's license. And now you fast forward and you have etched glass on the windows going into the lodge, and you have a 2-story lodge with a game room, and you have these cabins, which, oh my, have flush toilets and wait for it, showers.
Wow.
I mean, so it's not, it went from camping to framping a little bit on Charlie's watch and what he's done. And then just the things you don't realize, like the water system and all that Charlie went through. And you talk about grit, and how many years, Charlie, did you work on getting that well in there and finding the right spot? And we thought we're hitting a dry well for so many times, and Charlie, just like 72, just kept at it, kept talking to people. God kept leading him. Now we have these huge tanks up the hill that store water, and gravity brings it down, and it's just, one miraculous story after another. Family camps now at Mount Care, and obviously Bill's picking up from a tremendous legacy from Charlie and all the many blessings that God showered on all of us through Charlie and through his will. But it's a really pretty phenomenal story, and he wasn't going to give it to you, so I thought maybe I should.
Yeah. Mount Care is a special place.
Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
Great, Charlie.
No, God is good, and the camp's been in great hands. I got to thank each of you guys for doing this. Finally, as we wrap it up, it's been 50 years. I mean, it was just a night in the fall, when you're a high school guy and you guys have gone on to families and grandkids and great careers and even some retirements. But if you could, each of you talk about, I don't know, what it feels like 50 years ago to win Rio Hondo's first CIF championship. Jim, I'll start with you. What, I mean, 50 years ago, 50 years anniversary. Here we are, 1973 to 2023.
Obviously it's a great thing. I'm glad and proud to be part of it. I mean, in the sense of, I would have never even known it was the 50th anniversary had you not called and scheduled this thing. It would never even have probably entered my mind. Though I love the idea. In fact, I'm thinking I want to come down to watch some games this year, just because of that reason, right? I mean, I don't know. As I get the opportunity, I still work. I manage a faith-based nonprofit now. So I don't think retirement's ever ahead of for me, and because they're just not part of who I am and what my life is about. But I love the idea that I'm glad that Rio Hondo Prep won CIF. It one of many. Obviously now I think it's the winningest school in California history, isn't it? Now, I don't know. I could be wrong, but I thought I heard that at one time. You guys have more CIF championships than any other school, maybe in football, or I don't know if that's true or not.
But, we're up there. We're up there for sure.
But it's great, and of course, my brother's there, and my family's been there, and so there's nothing I love more than Care Youth League and what it provides for the children. Giving them an opportunity to do a relationship with Jesus Christ, and like John, camp means everything to me, because that's where I came to my salvation.
I don't care.
And I'm for making that a place that God can call home for Care Youth. So
absolutely,
anyway, that's my memories.
And Charlie, as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot bigger things, more important things than high school football. But your experience with Coach Kalinos kind of maybe showed you that, yeah, athletics can be a good thing and really build character for future. 50 years ago, CIF Championship, the first one in Rio's history. You've gone on to, again, bigger and better things. But I don't know, what's the lasting memory for you in 1973?
Well, I think these guys have summed it up really well. I can't add much. Coach Scalinos would say, if you are really trying to win, either the best comes out of you or the worst comes out of you. So love what's sitting right behind you, Matthew's Charge to Keep, which is, yeah, the song we'd sing at the end of the games. Yeah, God to glorify. So that's the anchor right there.
It is.
Yeah, it doesn't change. And yeah, those words are very powerful. John Martin, to sum us all up, 50-year anniversary of Rio's first CIF championship team.
I will say it's something that deep in my heart, I always get to keep with me. And I will not at the same high level, but in its own level, it's always there. God did something for you that was real. And I would liken it to what I would say to some people who may be struggling at times, that God's faithfulness to us, whether we deserve it or not, which we don't, is very similar to that experience of you can always have it with you. And no matter where you are today, no matter what has happened or what you've done, I think through all my life and all the blunders, I know that I always have a CIF championship with me, but I also know that I always have God with me and that faithfulness. And I think in some way, and the way God worked and the way everything transpired, it was just kind of a reminder to me that at the end of the day, faith is faith. and we're saved by faith, and God did it for us through Jesus, and we can keep that in our heart through everything. So it was a little microcosm of that experience that I always get to keep with me. And I'm very appreciative, obviously, and thankful for that experience.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up. Thank you guys so much. Hey, 50 years later, you got lifelong friends. You guys, I'm sure, it seems like still great friends and could talk about anything. This has been a blast. And I think it's something that parents and of current players can look at and be like, hey, our young men are in good hands with the program, and, hopefully have these same relationships that you guys have. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Congratulations, guys. You're 1973 CIF champions. Bye, guys. Well, you talk about the great men who have gone through Rio Hondo football. There was 3 of them right there, some incredibly God-fearing men and men that are just leaders in their industry, have had great lives, and are now, living, not necessarily retired, but just enjoying the fruits of their labor, if you will. So to Jim Parker, John Martin, and Charlie Parsons, thank you from the bottom of my heart, not just coming on the podcast today, but for representing what Rio Hondo Prep stands for all these years, and in your various lines of work. 50 years, man, is a long time. I mean, when you're a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid, playing football, you're just kind of like, all that stuff later. It's life and death right now, right? But those guys, they really summed up the lessons and the journey that was Rio Hondo football, and kind of the lasting legacy, if you will. So if parents or whoever is like looking at the football program as an option, I think that it's, again, the lasting legacy, the character that is built in people. I know I've been affected by it big time. It's been great for my growth over the years, having gone through the program. And it's funny how some things never change. The consistency of the Rio Hondo Prep football program, a charge to keep, indeed, is the best way to sum things up and to just carry it with us, because no matter if you're a recent graduate or you've been out of high school 50 years, that alma mater, those words still ring true. A charge to keep, I have definite no-brainer as far as the title of this podcast. And we try to play it after most of them, because I think the words ring true. And there's a reason Rio Hondo sings that after every single game, win or lose. So the season is right upon us. We are right around the corner. 2023 kicks off down in San Diego at Francis Parker, August 19th, week 0. And we hope to see our alumni out there, whether it's Jim Parker down from Reno or people here in Southern California making the trip to the game. And if you can't make that one, there's plenty of home games. I think 6 total this year. So a lot of opportunities there. I think it would be great if we could do something for the 1973 team, maybe a halftime or pregame ceremony of some kind. I am a little busy with all this, so I can't throw it together, but maybe somebody will, and we can get everyone out there and gather them up and say, hey, 50 years, man, 50-year anniversary of Rio Hondo's first CIF football championship in 1973. A special group indeed. Many have followed. And the program has just been very, very consistent, and appreciate talking to all these guys, going down memory lane and hearing some fun stories, and just the leadership and the coaches. It never gets old here on the Charge to Keep podcast. I love it. I love doing this, and I just can't wait for football season. Let's kick this thing off. No more talking, no more waiting. Let's go. More football, more lessons, more everything out there in the crazy, crazy fall that is upcoming. If you're new to the podcast, guys, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Charge to Keep is our official hashtag. No A in there, just Charge to Keep. And then our email address, chargetokeeppod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. So shoot us a message on either social media, send me an email, thoughts, maybe guest suggestions, whatever. Love hearing from you guys out there. And of course, you can watch the podcast on YouTube as well as rumble.com. It's just a couple options there. And if you want to do audio only while you're in the car or something, you can find a Charge to Keep pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon Music, even. A lot of options out there. Give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe. Let's grow this podcast. We got some good followers now and some good listeners now, but I think we can increase that and make this the best high school football podcast in America. That's my goal. I don't know what you guys think, if that's possible or attainable, but I can't control much of what goes on the field. That's the coaches, that's the players. All I can do is report it and get it out there to the alumni and keep the enthusiasm going here on the Charge to Keep podcast. Thanks again, guys. Summer is almost over. It's almost over, which is kind of bittersweet, but football is right around the corner. High school football specifically, and 2023, a great year indeed. And 50 years from Rio's first CIF championship. Wouldn't it be kind of cool, kind of fitting if maybe, I don't know, I don't want to speak too soon, but wouldn't it be nice to have a championship 50 years from the first one? I think that would be kind of a cool storybook ending. I don't know. We'll throw it out there. It's time for a deep playoff run. I know that here in Rio Hondo football land, but all you can do is roll the ball out there and see what happens. May the best man or the best team win. Let's get it going. Thank you, John Martin, Jim Parker, and Charlie Parsons for taking us down memory lane and representing the 1973 team, the first championship team in Rio Hondo history 50 years ago. That's it for me, guys. I will leave you, as always, with a kind reminder to be humble in victory and gracious in defeat, because we always have a charge to keep.
A charge to keep I have, a God to glorify, a never-dying soul to save, and fit it for the sky. Arm me with jealous care, as in thy sight to live, and O thy servant, Lord, prepare a strict account to give.